thanks everybody for joining us, and I'm going to continue to admit people as they show up. 7:06. We'll just start with these. Hey, so Kathy just told us that she will be presenting her Sunset Cliffs talk for Point Loma Assembly on June 10th. And at what time? 4 o'clock? 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock.
On Zoom.
So it's early bird special for Kathy's Sunset Cliffs talk, all new and updated on the 10th of June. And then on June 15th, La Playa Trail Association will be presenting Don Lake doing a lap around the bay, a lap around San Diego Bay, and that'll be at 7 p.m. And you can get that link, and it will be for La Playa Trail Association. Don Lake will be speaking, and you might have seen his book was just out recently with the same title. And then next month for us, for OB Historical Society, we are going to have Karen Scanlon back with us, and Karen is going to be talking about the recent restoration of the Lower Lighthouse, which we call the New Lighthouse, even though it's 103 years old. And she calls it San Diego's operational lighthouse. And she's going to be talking actually a little bit about, there are 6 lighthouses around the bay. So that'll be fun. As you know, Karen's an expert on that. So that will be back in this spot next month, June 17th at 7 p.m. And then check our website to get the link, and you'll probably get a postcard in the mail and all of that stuff. Hey, we would like to congratulate Susan and Pat James, because they have been keeping the flame, don't you know? And they won the Keepers of the Flame Award for Soho for the upkeep and restoration of the Wisteria Cottage, which they call home, and continuing to hold the Wisteria garden parties when local ordinances permit. So congratulations to Pat and Susan. Great work. The place always looks beautiful anyway. So we are very proud of them for that. And so I will tell you that the Soho little awards thing is, I think it's next week at this time. May 27th. So in just a week, the Soho People in Preservation Awards. So next week, just a week from now. So congratulations to Pat and Susan. And I would like to remind you folks, if you'd like to become a member of Ocean Beach Historical Society, that is a wonderful thing to do, and it's only $15. And you can find an application on our website, obhistory.org. So thank you very much for that. Hey, we're lucky to have with us this evening Mr. Alex Bevil, who has been with us before, even last year or the year before, fairly recently. And over the past 20 years, Alex had been California State Parks historian, as well as former board member for Soho and past president of the Congress of History. And as you know, Alex has written extensively about a lot of different topics in San Diego history. He's been researching, writing, lecturing, and helping to preserve local, state, and national history. And a key part of his efforts is preserving local memory. And by doing so, he hopes to reintroduce San Diegans to individuals whose contributions to our history have mostly been forgotten. And one of those is the subject of tonight's presentation about Winifred Davidson. So please welcome Alex Bevil. All right, Alex, take it away.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Yep.
Tonight's presentation is a biography of a pioneer local historian whose work had inspired me to become a local historian some 33 years ago. Her quotation reminds me of her contemporary philosopher, George Santayana's famous saying, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." However, her quote is more in line of enhancing and promoting her adopted city's historical and cultural accomplishments rather than its shortcomings. This is in several parts. We're going to focus on her arrival at Point Loma and life at Madame Catherine Tingley's Lomaland. In late April 1905, a very pregnant 31-year-old Mrs. Winifred Davidson arrived on Point Loma, where she took up temporary residence in a tent cabin similar to this one on the grounds of the Theosophical Society's Lomaland homestead. A former member of the Society's Buffalo, New York Lodge, where she met her future husband, John, around 1900, Winifred, who was determined to have her child born at Lomaland, had left Buffalo slightly 2 weeks ahead of her husband and his sister, Eola. When they arrived at Lomaland on May 19th, they were greeted by Winifred and her daughter, May, so named to commemorate her May 1st birthday. Can you imagine what that ride on the transcontinental train was like? It was a race against time, literally. The following year, the three adult Davidsons moved out of the small tent cabin on Lomaland's windswept bluffs into a small home on Union Street near downtown San Diego, where John became superintendent of the Magic Craft Garter and the Port Orient Box Companies. Little May did not accompany them because on August 8th, 1905, as in most followers of Theosophy, the Davidsons had chosen to dedicate their 3-month-old daughter at Lomaland's Aryan Temple, where she was placed in the care of the settlement's nursery to be raised with other of the temple's resident children. The following year, they enrolled May in the Raja Yoga School, overseen by the charismatic Madame Catherine Tingley. The school would expose her to a regimented routine of obedience, silence, and service to the community in order to shape young May to eventually serve humanity. Separated by her parents, who could only visit on Sundays, May was one of 5 toddlers assigned to a teacher caretaker who daily accompanied them into the dining hall and then to one of the formal classrooms to observe the older students. When May turned 3, she was placed in one of the classrooms for half an hour, which increased to a maximum of 3 hours for older students. Here she learned mathematics, spelling, music, drama, and participated in readings from the Bhagavad Gita or other esoteric works. The Davidsons returned to Lomaland in 1911, where, wearing uniforms, they worked for room and board, plus a small stipend for personal items. While John worked as a purchasing agent, Winifred taught Latin, German, and shorthand to girls. Likewise, she reportedly served as one of Madame Tingley's personal secretaries and contributed to the Institute's Loma magazine. They also volunteered to help produce ancient Greek dramas and Shakespearean plays at Lomaland's Greek Theater, as well as performances at downtown San Diego's Isis Theater, the former Fisher Opera House, which Madame Tingley had purchased in 1902. From 1914 to 1923, John Davidson became the Isis Theater's manager/cashier. Part of his responsibilities was shuttling musicians and other performers from Lomaland to the theater and back in one of society's Oakland Roadsters, similar to this model. Described by Davidson as a racing tourist car with neither a top nor a windshield, the 2-cylinder powered car would bounce along primitive dirt roads at a bone-jarring 18 miles an hour. While it appeared that the Davidsons were living a good life at the Lomaland homestead, their daughter May did not share their feelings. Rebelling against the school's regimented lifestyle, she stole bits of food, then graduated to truancy. During one such event, at age 12, she and another girl ran away to nearby Ocean Beach. Once caught, she was sent back to Lomaland, where she was basically placed under house arrest. Confined to her room, she would boldly talk or sing loudly to herself during her 2-month confinement. During the 2-hour weekly parental visitation period, her mother, who usually sided with her fellow teachers and or custodians, often rebuked and or punished May, increasing May's defiance. Regarding these contentious visits, as well as her relationship with her parents, an adult May would later recollect, "That was something I had to do on Sundays. They weren't like parents. I didn't care anything about them." In this, and this will play along as we go along. In December 1919, the Davidsons moved out of the Lomanland homestead to a small bungalow on Hematite Street in Point Loma Ironton subdivision overlooking San Diego Bay. While John continued to work at the Isis Theater, Winifred stayed home with her sister-in-law to pursue her lifelong ambition to be a freelance writer. Quitting his position at the Isis Theater in 1922, John tried his hand in real estate before securing a job as a cashier at the opulent Spreckles Theater on Broadway in 1923. That year, they purchased and moved into a larger new home overlooking Roseville. However, no longer entitled to the Theosophical Society's free meals, John had been forced to swap theater passes for groceries to feed his family. John's two other sisters, Margaret and Irene, while visiting from Pennsylvania, helped out financially by operating a bookkeeping service near the theater. Although John and Winifred had left Lomanland, their 15-year-old daughter May still boarded at the Rajat Yoga School. This would be short-lived, however. While taking a leave of absence from the school to visit her aunts on March 1st, 1921, Madame Tingley unceremoniously notified May's parents that it would be best if she did not return, which was a passive-aggressive way of telling them that she was expelled. Now saddled with a rebellious teenager, Davidsons were shocked to learn that May could neither read nor write proficiently, all of which exacerbated the relationship between mother and daughter. According to a 1982 interview, May stated that she always thought that her mother thought I was so dumb, that I always felt so inferior to her. Undaunted with tutoring from her aunts, May was able to overcome her inferiority complex enough to enroll at San Diego High School during the fall semester as a junior. After graduating, this 18-year-old dumb girl was accepted to San Diego State Teachers College, where she graduated with a bachelor's degree and a teaching credential in 1928. After which she reportedly found work as a local public school teacher. And you notice the discrepancy between this slide and that slide? May was still a consternation to her parents when on October 7th, 1928, during the Easter break, she had surprisingly eloped with New Hampshire-born hardware clerk Adelbert Frederick Miller to Yuma, Arizona, where they got married. Returning to San Diego, they were formally married, I guess for her parents' sake, it seems, in the Davidsons' new home that they had built on Carlton Street 5 years earlier. The following year, May, who had moved into a nearby bungalow with Adelbert, gave birth to a son, John Davidson Miller, on March 24th, 1929. With her now married daughter out of the house and her husband commuting to work during the day, the now 52-year-old Winifred Davidson could resume her favorite activities, gardening and writing. Gee, just like me. Let's go to part 2, the genesis of a young writer and local historian. Mrs. Davidson's interest in writing goes back to her Pennsylvania childhood. The third child of 9 born to hotel owner-operators Catherine and Russ Hall McIntyre, she was already a prolific reader and writer at 7. Influenced by Cervantes' Don Quixote, she would write poems or thrilling love tales while still in grammar school. Although graduating from East High School in 1890 with honors in Latin and German, her parents could not afford to send her to college. Instead, she attended a secretarial school before obtaining a secretarial position in a Buffalo, New York firm specialized in maritime law. It was while she lived and worked in Buffalo that Winifred became a member of the local American Theosophical Society Lodge. Here she volunteered to contribute poems, essays, and children's stories under the pseudonym Yetta K. Stoddard for the Lodge's newspaper based on the Society's esoteric way of life that encouraged an open-minded inquiry into world religions, philosophy, science, and the arts in order to understand the wisdom of the ages, respect the unity of all life, and help people explore spiritual self-transformation. Over the next 24 years, Mrs. Davidson would write and have published additional children's stories, verse, and articles in such notable nationwide publications as Christian Family, The Brownies Book, Picture Story Paper, Every Child's Magazine, Boy's World, and Girls Weekly. Mrs. Davidson grew up in a time when most well-read Americans believed that everyone, particularly educated women, could and should write and have their work published. Many regional and national publishers encourage both amateur and professional writers like her to submit articles based on local myths, legends, and folklore. They saw these as a means to preserve an area's cultural history for future generations. Inspired by her surroundings and an innate curiosity of the past, while strolling down dirt paths from her Carlton Street home, down deep arroyos toward the bay with her little Spitz poodle Hector, she often wondered how many Native Americans had preceded her. After reaching the shoreline communities of Roseville and La Playa, she would stop to chat with old-time residents. After learning about the sites of a forgotten Spanish fort, hide houses, and whaling stations at La Playa, as well as Louis Rose's gamble that his namesake subdivision would be the terminus of a transcontinental railroad, she would return to her home to transcribe her notes. Based on observations and interviews, she composed a series of Point Loma sonnets, which were published in national serials. The Boston Transcript described one of these, Rain, the first published under her given name, as one of the distinguished poems of 1924. That same year, American literary critic William Stanley Braithwaite published 12 of her sonnets in his critically acclaimed anthology of magazine verse. This, plus the publication of her sonnets in Great Britain's Poetry Review, brought her international fame as one of the most prolific writers from San Diego, as well as one of the most successful modern writers from California. The results were her appointment as president of the American Literary Association and vice president of the London Poetry Society. As she continued to gather information, Winifred began to despair about Point Loma's lost history. Determined to correct this, she composed and submitted a number of sonnets and articles based on the peninsula's history to the local beach news. Published weekly as Loma Lore, her 40-odd articles helped reveal to her readers the role Point Loma played as, according to Mrs. Davidson, the place where California began. Among the articles, readers were members of the San Diego Chamber of Commerce, which would commission Mrs. Davidson in 1926 to write a brief history of Point Loma Lighthouse. The first of many pamphlets and articles she would write devoted to identifying previously or unknown or unrecognized local historic landmarks. 2 years later, she contributed to the November 1929 issue of the Chamber's San Diego magazine. Dedicated to local history, the issue also included an article by local philanthropist George W. Marston, who, as president of the newly organized San Diego Historical Society, would play an important role in promoting her career. While Mrs. Davidson's star as a noted local author and historian rose, her personal life was in flux. Sadly, around 1929, May's marriage had failed. During divorce procedures, she and her infant son moved back in with her parents. After the divorce's finalization, May relocated to Pasadena, where she enrolled at the Huntington Memorial Hospital School of Nursing, the tuition of which her father magnanimously paid. While attending school, she had left her son in the care of her parents and Aunt Eolia. Surprisingly, according to May, my mother was just tickled to death to have a child that she could bring up because she hadn't had the chance to bring me up. No doubt, with the help of her live-in sister-in-law, Winifred was able to find time from her grandson's care to finish writing her first and only published book, Where California Began. A collection of legends, oral traditions, and stories interspersed with historical facts about the peninsula's history. Mrs. Davidson herself described it as history, authentic as research can make it, viewed through the eyes of a poet. Published in July 1929, the well-received book would inexorably draw her into the vanguard of San Diego's historic preservation movement during the next 2 decades. Coinciding with the book's publication, on July 16, 1929, 160th anniversary of San Diego's founding, George W. Marston gifted Presidio Park to the people of San Diego, referred to as the Plymouth Rock of the West. The 30-acre park contained the sites and buried ruins of the first Catholic Spanish mission in Fort, excuse me, for Presidio in California. Marston also funded the design and erection of the Junipero Serra Museum on a ridge overlooking the Presidio site. Completed in 1929, the impressive San Diego colonial revival style building would serve as the headquarters of the newly formed San Diego Historical Society. With George W. Marston as president, its goal was to conserve, store, and interpret art, relics, records, books, and ephemera pertaining to San Diego's Hispanic past. Owing to jumpstart that goal, in 1930, John Davidson, as the Serra Museum assistant and later senior curator, initiated and oversaw a campaign to seek public donations of historical books, papers, diaries, photographs, maps, and other objects from museum exhibits and collection. Assisting Davidson's goal was his wife, Winifred, who, after being elected to the Historic Society's board of directors on April 14, 1931, became the Historical Society's first staff historian. After transferring the bulk of her personal interviews, notes, article manuscripts, and rare book collection to the Serra Museum, which would become the core of the nascent museum's archival collection, she would spend the next 33 years researching, writing, lecturing, and attempting to preserve San Diego's pioneer history. Ironically, because she held an unpaid volunteer position, she would always regard herself as an amateur historian. In addition to her role as Historical Society historian, as a member of the California State Historical Association, she spent the next 33 years conducting classes and field trips, seeking to fulfill its goals to educate Californians about their state's history through the location, identification, and preservation of local landmarks. Now let's talk about the godmother of San Diego's lost history. On January 10, 1934, Mrs. Davidson was one of several hundred people who had gathered under the shade of a giant eucalyptus tree on the west side of Rosecrans Street, in between Addison and Byron Streets. The Point Loma Assembly, a local women's club, for which she was a founding member, had invited all to witness the unveiling of a concrete marker commemorating an important aspect of San Diego's lost history, the route of the old La Playa Trail. Designed and cast at Old Town's La Paloma Studios, the marker featured a bas-relief of a young male California Indian leading an ox-driven carreta along the oldest commercial trail in California, caravans of which would have passed along the site during the colonial Spanish, Mexican Rancho, and early California statehood eras, carrying people, provisions, and goods along the trail to and from ships anchored off La Playa, which I'm sure you know is Spanish for the beach, along the 12-mile wagon trail skirting San Diego Bay's northern tidal marsh to the fort, mission, and later pueblo of San Diego de Acla. As an active member of the Point Loma Assembly, as well as the La Playa Trail Marking Committee, and in her role as a San Diego Historic Society staff historian, Mrs. Davidson had contributed over 10 years of research regarding the trail's historic route, use, and significance. In addition, as a member of the California State Landmarks Committee and as the chairperson of the San Diego County History and Landmarks Committee, Mrs. Davidson was responsible for providing background research that led to the placement of bronze plaques at 48 places of historic interest. 3 of these were on Point Loma, the site of Fort Guerreros, where the Battle of San Diego Bay occurred on March 22, 1803, Cabrillo National Monument, and the aforementioned La Playa Trail. Mrs. Davidson was also keenly aware of the symbiotic relationship between historic landmarks and the ever-growing phenomenon of automobile tourism in Southern California in order to promote a widespread interest in local history. During the 1930s, she provided information to the local Chamber of Commerce and Hotel Association, as well as the North San Diego Improvement Club, to assist the Southern California Automobile Club to erect historic roadside landmark markers, signs throughout San Diego County. 20 other California counties soon followed her example. In her quest to gather information regarding these and other significant landmarks, as well as authenticating the museum's library collection, Mrs. Davidson sought and interviewed many senior Old Town San Diego descendants who could serve as living links to the past. For example, every Thursday, John would drop her off in the middle of Old Town before continuing up Presidio Hill Drive to open the museum. While there, she would usually chat with longtime residents, all the while utilizing her stenographical skills to record what she called facts, legends, and folklore. Afterwards, when he picked her up, John would ask her if anyone talked history today. As she slowly ingratiated herself to locals, members of San Diego's earliest pioneer family began lending her long-forgotten letters and diaries, which she dutifully transcribed before returning them. The problem was, many of these were written in Spanish, which was also the primary language of most of the folks who had them in their possession. Undeterred, Mrs. Davidson sought to find bilingual descendants who would help her interpret the documents, as well as locate additional pioneer families to interview. One of these, also, she was determined to learn Spanish. One of these, feisty septuagenarian Mrs. Lucy Brown Wentworth, the former Luz de Villar, grudgingly acted as her Spanish tutor. Utilizing an ancient Spanish language lexicon, she would interject her own experiences growing up on Point Loma as impromptu history lessons. For example, when discussing the Spanish word for ox, el buey, Donna Luz of the Iron Memory remembered that when her father, Captain John Brown, was at sea, she led her family's oxenwood wagon from her home at La Playa to fetch supplies at Old Town. Oh, a carreta, remarked Mrs. Davidson. You drove oxen yoked to a carreta? Indeed, she responded. Mother rode in the cart with my sister, while I carried a long stick walking beside the oxen. Whether by design or accident, Mrs. Wentworth had introduced Mrs. Davidson to the old La Playa Trail. As a former Latin teacher, it wasn't difficult for Mrs. Davidson to master conversational Spanish. Thereafter, she interviewed hundreds of Spanish-speaking families on both sides of the border, as well as translated rare mission and military records and local Spanish language newspapers to dispel many myths and help piece together the previously disconnected stories regarding California and, by extension, San Diego's earliest beginnings. Armed with this information, she authored a series of local newspaper articles over a 12-year span. Famous First of San Diego, Old Tales of the Southwest, and the Romance of Old San Diego. These were published in the San Diego Union, as well as True Love Stories of Early California in the Los Angeles Times Sunday magazine. She also contributed to her husband's articles about San Diego County's place names, as well as a later series of local place names of her own. Mrs. Davidson also lent her time and knowledge to local students and historians. For example, she reviewed Hero Eugene and Ethel Grace Wrench's historic spots in California in 1932. 4 years later, she also contributed the entire chapter on San Diego history and Carl H. Heilbronn's History of San Diego County. In the latter's book's foreword, Heilbronn recognized Mrs. Davidson as a leading authority of San Diego County history, who had written the most historically correct narrative of this period yet written. While age was inevitably catching up to Mrs. Davidson, it hardly slowed her down. Besides writing articles, she contributed to advocate for the recognition and preservation of local historic sites and landmarks, particularly Old Town's El Campo Santo Cemetery, El Jardín de Muertos, the Spanish camp and cemetery site at the foot of Presidio Hill, and the Cabrillo National Monument on Point Loma. Recognition of her 50-year collaboration as husband and wife, on July 24, 1951, the Davidsons renewed their wedding vows, followed by a reception and dinner at Old Town's Casa de Machado. 2 years later, on September 22, 1953, the San Diego Historical Society held a special ceremony at the Surrey Museum honoring their 25 years of service to the organization. While John Davidson soon retired as the Surrey Museum's executive director, 79-year-old Winifred Davidson continued to serve as the museum's historian and on the San Diego Historical Society's board of directors for the next 10 years. During this time, she continued to seek out and transcribe historical records and translate Spanish manuscripts for the museum's library collection. As the Davidsons grew older, they were fortunate to have their twice divorced nurse daughter, May Miller Atherton, live and care for them for the remainder of their lives. She and her grandson, who had returned once again to live in their Point Loma home, also helped fill the vacancy left by Aunt Yola, moving out of the house in 1938. While her father would live to be 98 years old, her mother, Winifred, sadly preceded him 11 years early in 1964. Let's talk about Mrs. Davidson's legacy. News of Winifred Davidson's death has reverberated throughout San Diego's historical and literary communities. Richard F. Parad, editor emeritus of the San Diego Union and author of a series of books on San Diego history, said of Mrs. Davidson, she, more than anyone else for more than a quarter of a century, kept alive the memories of the old Mexican and Spanish days in San Diego during a period when no one wanted to listen. She also laid the groundwork for much of what is being done now to preserve the Spanish heritage in San Diego. Mrs. Elvira Wittenberg, president of the San Diego Historical Society, said that she was dearly loved by so many. She had a soft, sweet manner that charmed everyone. I don't know of anyone who has given so generously of their time to San Diego history. We have many, many files composed solely of her work. She certainly will be missed. While copies of her books, sonnets, poems, and articles on San Diego's early history are still available to scholars at the current San Diego Historical Center and San Diego Central Library's archival collections when they reopen, except for her immediate family and a few select local historians, like me, the life and legacy of one of San Diego's most eminent and best-loved historians has largely been forgotten. Not even her former home on Carlton Street exists. Shortly after her father died on January 6, 1975, May had it torn down and replaced with a more modern style home. This presentation is the first of 3 works I put together in a campaign to promote this remarkable woman's pioneering contributions in uncovering Point Loma, as well as all of San Diego County's lost pioneer history. The second is an upcoming article in the June 17th Point Loma and Ocean Beach Monthly based on this presentation. The third is a more expansive article I will be submitting to the San Diego History Center for inclusion in an upcoming Journal of San Diego History publication. Thank you for your interest, patience, and attentiveness. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Alex. That was
Oh, well.
wonderful. I just have a comment, and that was, you mentioned the eucalyptus tree where the plaque was originally installed there near Byron Street on Rosecrans. When I was writing the story about the Festa, I found a photo from 1932 of the Festa procession going up Addison Street, and that eucalyptus tree is very much in prominence in that photo, and it's in the Portuguese community book also.
Oh,
but it doesn't say anything about it. You kind of have to know what it was. So yeah,
what happened to it?
Got cut down, of course.
Of course. Okay.
Hey, Alex, I have a question.
Sure.
Did May's son leave us with any descendants of theirs?
Yes. Those. Let me skim through here real quick.
You would ask that question, Pat.
That's fine.
I don't know if you touched on that or not.
I want questions. I want what I can't answer, I'll make up. Okay. This photo, the photo of the young lad. I don't have it. Anyway, the photograph of the bungalow. They're all from the collection of John. get this right, John Davidson Miller Atherton.
Atherton.
He was very generous to give me those. There he is. That's his father,
Okay.
and he later became a Marine of all things, and so they have a pretty, I'd say a pretty good collection of photos. Oh, the one showing her. The ones at Lomaland are from the family collection.
Oh, wow.
I found these very interesting, very revealing about that particular environment. So, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And is he still in the area here? Do you know, or
No, he's back east.
back east?
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Great
Yeah.
presentation.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Kitty.
Alex,
Let's play Stump the Chump.
did John Davidson end up living in Mission Hills?
No,
No, okay.
they lived in the first house was rented, one on Hematite. The second one on Carlton, they built themselves.
And they stayed there. So even after she died, he never ended up in Mission Hills.
Who?
John.
No,
No, okay.
no.
Thanks.
He's a Point Lomian, tried and true.
All right.
Anybody else have any questions for Alex? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Let's ask some more. Come on.
Just a fan's note, I really appreciate the work. Lots of research, sir. Appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Technically, I've been interested in her work going back to I'd say the late 80s, early 90s, when I worked as a intern at the long defunct city architect's office, doing the neighborhood historic surveys and such, and I had given a project to review something that was going on down at the foot of Presidio Hill, and I found out that I didn't know that there was a cemetery there, and still is. And so I found information about it that she had written about it, and I go, well, who is this woman? And I found that she had written a book, and then I kind of put it on the back burner. And then when I developed a presentation on the cemetery a few years ago for a Congress of History presentation, I found a lot more information about the dedication ceremony, and she was one of the speakers after Marston. And she said it at the time, it was sad that the bones of these pioneers still came to the surface. And I'm reading that and I'm going, yeah, it's kind of sad that no one, it's funny how things sort of just disappear. And not only is the memory of the cemetery gone, or the gardens that were down there, her memory. And I would hazard to say that of everyone watching this, I doubt if one person knows about Mrs. Davidson.
Where was
I
this?
I was just gonna say, I first ran across her name when I first read Beach Town some 40 years ago, when Ruth Held credited her with quite a bit of the information that she wrote about. So
That was one thing about her. She gave information away to anyone who asked. She thought it was her duty as a local the staff historian at the Historic Society.
I don't, can you hear me? I don't have anything to contribute on Mrs. Davidson, but I was born in 36, and my father, who died about 10 years ago, would mention to me, and of course I was going to Dana Junior High, I think in 49 and Point Loma to 55. My father would talk, who grew up in Ocean Beach, would talk about Mrs. Tingley. And I remember going up there, riding my bike around those buildings that you showed. They were all abandoned, but we rode our bikes around up there. I guess in the 50s, and they were all abandoned. But he would talk about Mrs. Tingley. I don't think he ever saw her, but he would, and the institute. So this, I found this interesting, but I know nothing about Mrs. Davidson.
That's great.
That's good.
Thank you, Jack.
That was great, Jack. What a memory.
Anybody else? Well, hey, thank you very much, Alex. That was great. It was really interesting. Sooner or later, we are going to have all of the volumes of the beach news that we have, and by that I mean OB Historical Society. We have about 11 volumes, so 11 different years from the first year, which was 1922, until shortly after the Second World War. So we don't have every year, but we have quite a few, and they will all be online through the California State Library. So
That'd be fantastic.
yeah,
The
and
only-
Yeah, I'm curious to try to get a feeling of her writing style.
yeah,
Because those of you who read her book, it's not a book on history per se. It's really sort of esoteric, very, I don't want to put it. It's really flowery, poetic, and there's facts in there, yes, but they're really surrounded by romanticism.
First of all, Alex, thank you very much for including me on this. I've been very, very nice
Hey,
presentation.
Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing well. They're doing very well. Yeah, loved everything about it. And that was actually going to be my question. Was she kind of, I guess, in comparisons with the other historians of the time, was she, and you kind of got to it there, she was kind of romantic with, or in her writing style, would you say? It wasn't kind of as factual, maybe? It was more...
No, it was very factual. Those articles that I showed you, their style were very much, let's see.
While you're looking, in fact, factual wasn't the right word, but more encyclopedic. She
No,
yeah.
no, it was, this happened then, and the reason it happened was because then she would talk about so-and-so eloped with such and such from Rancho so-and-so, that kind of thing. Or she would like, it was not clinical, let me put it that way. If you looked at her writings in the later Heilbronn book, History of San Diego, it's much more factual. It's less frou-frou and more, this happened, and because this happened, that kind of logistics going towards it. You'll learn from it. You'll get an idea of what's going on. You go back to her earlier stuff. She's writing more as a poet.
Cool.
Then as you get to the 1930s and up to the 1950s, it's more of a historian.
Cool. That's awesome.
Thank you.
that one quote you used, Alex, which I think was from a book review of Where California Began. It said something about that she wrote with the soul of a poet or something like that, which I thought was good. I thought that was a good.
Yeah, that was also from a newspaper article I dug up reviewing the book.
Yeah.
And that quote, that's a direct quote from her. Which
Oh,
I found kind of weird.
I liked it though.
Yeah, that's very nice. I still, I don't know. I don't know if there's any folks from the San Diego History Center. I know one I invited. When I asked down there, they have no idea who she was.
Oh, boy.
I know. And I'm hoping that through this, through my article in the Point Loma and Ocean Beach Monthly, and hopefully if they publish my article on her, that it may open their eyes and maybe do something. It'd be nice to have I don't know, maybe rename the archives after her or something to that effect. One of the rooms in the museum. I mean,
That'd be good. Yeah.
she
it really
she
would.
and her husband basically created the current library and archives of the San Diego History Center. And if you go down there, you can still find her works as part of the core of those archives. And if you go down to the what is it now? It used to be the California room, the downtown public library. I forget let's call it the local history room. There are bound volumes of her newspaper articles that some are from her and some are from others who've put them together and there's a typewritten index of them. So she basically put together these sort of journals or what would you call them, scrapbooks of her work, and online, as you can see here, the newspaper articles are available online if you have a subscription, or you go visit the San Diego State University or the UCSD libraries, and you can access them online and download them. And I started doing that, and then it's like, okay, this is a lifelong project.
Yeah.
But everything you've read about, say, something in San Diego that is very, very familiar to you, whoever wrote that got it from her. I guarantee.
Cool.
Well, thank you again, Alex. Thanks everybody for being with us this evening.
Eric, can I ask one quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Alex, did you run into anything? John DeBeck, he saved a lot of the photos from the title company when they went out of business. He worked there and they were throwing them out in the trash, and he'd pick out the best ones he could. And that's a lot of the early archives for the Historical Society. So I'm wondering if he had some kind of relationship. He'd be younger than her, but he was doing that while he was pretty young. But a lot of the basis of the archives are from what he found there. And he was also a theosophist, and he also lived in Point Loma. And when he gave a talk, he talked about having a paper route and delivering to 81 houses on horseback. He remembered in Point Loma and how many houses he had. But it just seems like their paths might have crossed. And
I think I remember reading an article about him.
I liked him.
Oh, you did?
Well, he put together the art that was donated to the San Diego school system.
Okay.
And I don't know if Johnny's on here. She said she helped with some of that.
Did he have any association with the Historic Society?
Yeah, he gave all the negatives to the society, and it's a lot of their collection of early photos.
And when
It was the title company, and like
Right.
I say, when they were going under, they threw away trash cans full, and he'd go through and pick out the best he could. I think some of them were even glass plates, so he could only take so much at a time. And
did you know when he did that?
I think he was fairly young. I'm trying to think. He's got to be in his late 80s now, maybe 90. I haven't talked to him in years. Fran Zimmerman's one who kept in touch with him. She might
Well-
know.
Well, if he did it before 1964, yes, he would have had to have been in contact with Mrs. Davidson. If he did it before 1953, then he would have been in contact with John, who I think would have been the person, because he was the curator of collections.
I have a feeling it was fairly early. It was like one of his first jobs. So it may have even been in
Or
the,
it could have been his replacement, Ben Dixon.
yeah.
But
So she
But
said it
yeah, if he's doing this for the Historic Society before 1964, he definitely would have been in contact with Mrs. Davidson. And I'm
I
sure
get on the title company, because if we
he
could
would
find
he
out
would
when they
help he
went out
would
of
help
business.
identify
give us-
he'd help identify the photos.
She's still
Yeah.
alive, right?
Yeah.
John DeBeck. He was a good superintendent of city schools,
Talk.
one of the best.
Pat may have on that. Anyhow. Okay. Well, I can talk to you more about him. I'll see if I can get a number for him.
All right, thanks, Kathy. And thanks again, Alex, very much. It was
Well,
wonderful.
welcome.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys later.
Okay,
Bye.
talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, Sammy.